They were so close to finally getting the answers, but still, no Denise. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Denise Pflum. Viewer discretion is advised. Denise Pflum was born and raised in Connersville, Indiana, and she was born on January 14th, 1968. She was one of two siblings. She also had a younger sister who was about 2 years younger than Denise. Denise had attended Connersville High School, where she ran track. She was excellent in her academics. She had been the treasurer of, the science club. She also played basketball and softball and volleyball. She was incredibly athletic and she was incredibly intelligent. Her goal was to actually study microbiology after graduating high school, and she'd already been accepted into Miami University, which was located in Ohio. She was really, really excited about starting that, but unfortunately, she would never get that opportunity. She was a senior in high school, and she was literally just a few months away from graduating. By March of 1986, the senior prom was coming up, and she was really looking forward to that. She had broken up with her boyfriend, Sean McClung, about a few weeks or so before this case occurred. So I don't know if she found a new date for the prom or not, but she was really excited to be going to it. When she broke up with Sean, it definitely put her into kind of a dark place for a little bit, but her family would say that she was starting to become, more sociable again. Denise had always been a very sociable person. She had a gigantic group of friends that she would always hang out with and have fun with. She got along with so many people. She was well liked. The community knew who she was. And so when this happens, it kind of affected a humongous amount of people. Denise would never even make it to her prom, because on March 27th, 1986, Denise had attended what was supposed to be a small little bonfire party at this, on a farm property somewhere near Connersville. This party, after she arrived, it went from being like a couple of people to a whole bunch of people. It was rowdy. It was, big party. A lot of people there. Denise stayed there for quite some time, but eventually she had to go home, so she got into her car and she went home. When she woke up the next morning, she realized that she had accidentally left her purse back at where the bonfire was being held the night prior. Sometime around noon, Denise would call a couple of friends and say, "Hey, can you ride with me to go get my purse from where the bonfire was?" Unfortunately, none of her friends could go along with her. I guess she was having some apprehensions about going there on her own. I don't really think they know why. I'm not sure. But Denise would get into her car sometime before 12:30, and she would head out to the bonfire area to go retrieve her purse. A neighbor would talk to her for a couple of seconds as she was walking towards her car, but after that, nobody saw Denise Pflum ever again. Denise got into her car with nothing. She just had her keys and that was it. She didn't have her driver's license. She didn't bring any of the essential things she would needed to if she were planning on going away on her own. She brought no clothes, no backpack, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so as a few hours go by, it's now getting into dinner time, and her family realizes she's still not home, and that's extremely unusual because she was always home for dinner, and they just thought this was concerning. So they wait another hour or two before they call police. Police tell them she is 18, she is only been gone for a few hours, there's really nothing we can do. So her parents start calling around to all of her friends that they have numbers for. They're going to friends' houses, seeing if she's there, but nothing. She isn't at any of their homes. None of them had seen her. I think it was later on that night or early the next morning, Denise's car, which was a 1981 Buick Regal, was found abandoned. It was parked along Tower Road. I guess it was just sort of like a one-lane dirt kind of type road at the time. There was a barn next to this area where she parked. The car was locked. There was no broken windows. There was no blood outside the car or inside the car. No signs of a struggle within the vehicle. Everything looked completely normal, minus the fact that Denise wasn't there. At that point, police are contacted about this car. They find out that it belonged to Denise Pflum, and then they open a missing person report. When they asked Denise's family, like, why would she be in this particular area, her family had no idea. It was not an area Denise really ever frequented. It was far from her home. It was also about 3 or 4 miles from the opposite direction, basically, of where she had intended to be going to where the bonfire was to get her purse. So next, the police go to the property where the bonfire was, and they ask the owners of that property, has Denise been here at all? They said no. Has Denise been here at all to get her purse? They said no. And that's because apparently one of Denise's cousins had come by to, I guess they had the purse already. Poor communication, I suppose. And the cousin brought the purse back after Denise had already left the house. You kind of have to, now that I'm thinking about it, like you kind of have to wonder, like, because he got there literally an hour after Denise left. Like if he had just called and said, hey, I got your purse, we're probably in a completely different situation here. I may not be telling this story. Next, police will interview the fresh ex-boyfriend, Sean McClung. They bring him in for questioning just because he's the ex-boyfriend. You know, the relationship ended. Everyone was upset. Maybe he did something out of that. He just said he saw Denise I guess the day of the bonfire, and last time he saw her, she was alive. A weird thing to say just because no one had said she was dead, so that was sort of odd. But police didn't really have any evidence that he did anything to her because, one, they didn't have her. They didn't have a crime scene. I'm assuming they dusted the car for fingerprints. I have to hope they did. I don't know if they found anything. Even if they did, it hadn't linked to anyone because they've never announced, oh my God, we have, a match to evidence. Really soon after Denise disappeared and they let Sean McClung go because they couldn't do anything, he moved to Arizona. Then on August 10th, 1988, Judy and David Pflum, who are the parents to Denise, they got a phone call from someone in Norfolk, Virginia, claiming that this person who was calling was their daughter, Denise. Judy thought this was credible because this girl called the house on a day where Judy was off from work. And Denise knew her work schedule, so she's like, oh, okay, this has to be her. She also thought the girl sounded like Denise. There is, I'm sure, I'm not a parent, so I can't relate or anything, but I'm sure as a parent, you just kind of want whatever you want to hear and believe what you want to hear and what you want to believe. Clinging on to any kind of hope. You have to, I would assume as a parent, to just hope that your daughter is still alive. They are able to identify where the phone number and they found out who it belonged to and where the address was. So they actually drive the 750-mile drive to Norfolk, Virginia to find their daughter. They go to an apartment complex that was linked to the number. They speak to the office officials there at the apartment complex. They find out that the girl who had the apartment where the phone number came from was a 19-year-old girl who used to live in Connorsville. When they found this girl in the apartment, she said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't call you. I didn't call and say that I was your daughter. And then she changed her tune. She said, okay, it was me. It was a hoax. I made it up. The neighbors of this girl had heard this girl bragging that she called the parents of Denise Pflum and she said, I'm going to do it again. Almost like it was just fun for her to give these grieving parents false hope. And so it was, once again, the case is now at a standstill again. They have gotten a lot of tips. They've gotten a lot of recommendations of people, talk to this person, talk to that person, but all of it led to nothing. They put up a $100,000 reward because usually money talks, right? That might lead someone to somewhere, but it didn't. In 2014, they are able to take DNA from one of Denise's baby teeth that her parents had saved. They created, the profile. They put the profile in their nationwide database and just to see if it maybe matched any kind of like Jane Does that have been found, but nothing. In September of 2018, the police announced that they have what they think is a big break in Denise's case. They said there is now evidence to suggest that Denise Pflum was definitely murdered, likely the day she disappeared. I guess there was an open field type property in Fayette that they believed that she may be buried in. I guess this was the Mary Graybird Sanctuary. They brought in cadaver dogs just to, help search, and it came up with nothing. They then brought in ground penetrating radar. They brought in all sorts of tools to see if they could find a body on this property, but they searched and searched and searched, and unfortunately, once again, nothing. Sean McClung, the ex-boyfriend who had moved to Arizona just after she disappeared, he's now living back in Connorsville. He moved back in like 2017 or so. They bring him back in for questioning just because they're taking a fresh look at this case and they're talking to everyone again. He says the same thing. Last time I saw her, she was alive, and I don't know anything else. Apparently, he took a voice stress test that I guess he failed. I don't really know how accurate those things are, though. I think they're similar to like lie detector tests where you can't use them in court. Then in July of 2020, they find out that Sean McClung has now been arrested and jailed for completely unrelated crimes. That gives them the opportunity to kind of dig deeper into his history. They find out that when he was living in Arizona, he had multiple domestic violence charges against him. He had been violent with his ex-girlfriends. So they took this as an opportunity, now that he's in jail, to ask him again. And this time, he confesses. He says he killed Denise. He said he killed her the day she disappeared in March of 1986. He claims that Denise had picked him up that day as she was on her way to the bonfire property to find her purse. He then says they got into a really big argument, and one thing led to another, and he killed her. And then he asked a couple of his friends to help hide her body, which apparently they did. Sean McClung was offered immunity for whatever reason for this case, but the deal breaker was he could not withhold any information about this case, meaning when they asked him, where is she, he was required to answer that question, but he refused. He says, I will not tell you where she is. And so the deal was off the table, but now they know he confessed. And so they end up charging him with voluntary manslaughter. They have not exactly released how he said he killed her. They also believe that Sean McClung made this confession because he's dying. He had a terminal illness that was going to claim his life very soon. And so they think that's why he confessed. But then why not say where she is? That doesn't make sense. If you're confessing to the murder, you know you're going to die soon. Why not just say where she is? What's the point? Is it just to be an asshole? Like just to be that much of a dick to her family who just want to bury her? That's it. They want to bury her. They want to know where she is so they can properly lay her to rest. So why? In September of 2020, just about a month or so after he was formally charged with the voluntary manslaughter, Sean McClung died. He never went on trial for the disappearance or murder. And allegedly, Sean McClung had given some information to his lawyer just 5 days before he died. His lawyer would eventually come out and say that a conversation he had with Sean before he died was that Sean falsely confessed to killing Denise Pflum. He said the only reason he confessed was because he thought it would get him out of jail for the other charges. Which, I mean, just to be kind of fair here, that kind of does make sense as to why he wouldn't say where she is, because maybe he didn't know where she was, because maybe he didn't kill her. Because it just isn't logical for you to say, all right, I'm dying, I'm going to confess to killing her. This is how it happened. This is when it happened, but I'm not going to tell you where she is. It for some reason, that is just like, it's so strange. And so maybe that is the reason why, because maybe he just falsely confessed. But there's also the chance that he did actually kill her. There could be a couple reasons, maybe, why he doesn't want to say where she is. Because one, he said that friends helped him bury her. And perhaps he doesn't want to release their names. Maybe by revealing where she is, it will point to other suspects in this case, and he doesn't want to get them in trouble. Maybe. That's one big reason I could think why he wouldn't say where she is. Or maybe because of this terminal illness, perhaps he forgot where she was and genuinely just didn't know where he put her. But any information he may have had, if he did have the information, is gone to his grave. Over the years, I know properties have been searched. I know the bonfire property, I think, had been searched, and other areas connected to people involved had been searched, usually with not very intrusive searches, like involves like cadaver dogs and ground penetrating radar, and they haven't found anything. Well, I guess there is one property that it's owned by a family called the Johnsons, where the Johnsons are not allowing them to search that property. One of the people who used to own this farm property was a man named Benjamin Johnson, who was friends with Sean McClung. Police have some very, I guess, minor information that Benjamin had at one point confessed, not to police, but to other people, about having knowledge of Denise's whereabouts or what happened to her. He himself was considered a person of interest back in the day. Never a suspect, but just someone who had been on their radar. The family has to now file a lawsuit, which they actually did just a couple of months ago in March of 2024, with regards to getting this property searched. They're looking for not only Denise, but Denise's belongings, like her clothing and a ring she had on. This family is just saying, no, you need to like take this to the courts. Like, come on now, why? If you're not guilty of anything, why? Just let them search. Again, it's not a very intrusive search. They want to do a very cursory with dogs and with ground penetrating radar type things, not dig up the entire property unless they have to. So why not let them do it? The lawsuit that the family of Denise Pflum has filed, and at this point both of her parents are now in their 80s, they're not saying they want to search the property in an attempt to determine who may or may not have killed her. They're just want to find their daughter's remains. That's it. It's literally in the lawsuit. We're not here to find out who did it at this point. We just want her. But they're making it, this Johnson family, for whatever reason, is making it extremely difficult for them to do that. That's insane to me. That's absolutely insane. Just let them get their daughter back, for God's sakes. Like, if it was your family member buried in some lonely hole somewhere, you'd want them back. And so it's just people. Ugh. But unfortunately, that's where this case stands. The main suspect, if his confession was true, which it certainly could have been true, is dead. The property that they want to find to see if their daughter is at, which they have a pretty strong feeling she may be there based on the connection to the ex-boyfriend who allegedly killed her, who was good friends with one of the owners of that property back in the day. They just want to search it to get their daughter back, but that's still kind of at a standstill. And so there is no closure here. They were this close to knowing everything, but it died with that man. However, there still is a chance that somebody somewhere out there knows the truth, knows what happened to Denise, and knows where she is. Perhaps a suspect talked to you, or maybe the person they talked to then talked to you. You know, if you have information, you can report it anonymously. You don't have to say who you are. You just have to say what you know. This is about getting their daughter back home and just laying her to rest properly. That's it. That's where it's at now. They don't think that justice will likely be done. There's a chance it could be, but probably not if their main guy is dead. They just want her. That is all this family is asking, and that's really not asking that much. Just give their daughter back. So if you have any information about the whereabouts of Denise Pflum or what may have happened to her, please contact the Sheriff's Department at 765-825-0535. If there is a chance for justice to be done, please let Denise Pflum and her family get the justice that they all rightfully deserve. At any rate, that is it for this video, True Crime Aroonies. So we shall see you for the next one. Ta-ta for now, True Crime. Aroonies. I'm practicing on rolling my R's. How am I doing?
Did your son ask you to do something for him, to assist him in a matter?
Yes, they did. Help dispose of Janet's body.
Hello, True Crimerers. This is the case of Janet March. Viewer discretion is advised. Janet Gail Levine was born on February 20th, 1963, and she was born in Nashville, Tennessee. Janet did have a sibling. Her parents were very respected and well-known lawyers in the area. I believe they specialized in insurance law. Janet's dad especially became a very kind of higher echelon person in Nashville and was one of the most respected lawyers in the entire state of Tennessee. And both he and his wife and eventually their children were very involved in the Jewish community as well. As Janet grew up, she had a love for art. She loved to paint, she loved drawing, and she became extremely talented at it. Her dream was to become an illustrator and an artist. I think she wanted to be an animator at some point. Her artwork was shown in some of the most prominent and prestigious, restaurants and community centers all across Nashville. She would attend the University School of Nashville. She was the vice president of her class there, and then eventually she was accepted to her father's alma mater. Janet was described as very passionate, especially when it came to her art. She was it kind of encapsulated her life a lot. She was well loved, she was charming, she was sweet, she was funny. She had personality for days and can make friends with anybody. She was not someone to ever be standoffish with people or kind of push people to the side. She was always very welcoming and very opening. At one point when she was in college, she was introduced by a friend to a guy named Perry March. Perry and Janet, they hit it off. They became boyfriend and girlfriends, and then it just sort of led to this blossoming relationship that would eventually lead to marriage. There was a time where Janet and Perry were actually in the Chicago area, and Janet was attending art school there. But it got to a point where Janet was just she didn't like being away from Nashville. She didn't like being away from her parents and from her family. And she really wanted to come back to the Nashville area. And in Nashville was the Vanderbilt Law School that Perry could possibly attend, because Perry was studying law. He wanted to become a lawyer. And, Janet's parents are very well-to-do. They had a lot of money. And so she convinced them to pay for Perry's law school at Vanderbilt. They did it. And so Perry and Janet would move to Nashville. Perry was a very astute guy, very smart, super intelligent. He had a lot of wit. He was very competitive. He was driven, and he seemed to, anytime he had a goal, anytime he wanted something, he basically would get it. So Janet and Perry, by the way, they married in 1987. The interesting thing is that it was not Perry who proposed to Janet. Janet had been impatient. She was waiting for him to finally pop the question, but he just wouldn't do it. And so she, one day, basically got on her knee and she proposed to Perry. And then he accepted, and then of course they would get married. Perry would eventually graduate law school. He would then begin to work at a law firm. It was called Bass, Berry & Sims in Nashville. And Janet had graduated school too, of course, and she had started to illustrate children's books. In 1990, Janet and Perry would give birth to their son, Samson. And then in 1994, they had a daughter who they named Zipporah. Perry's dad, Arthur March, was a prominent pharmacist for some time. After, all of the marriage happened and the kids came, Arthur's house in Michigan would eventually get foreclosed. And one of the cool things about Janet's parents, her dad specifically, he purchased Arthur's home and then would lease it back to Arthur. And he wasn't going to charge him rent. He was actually just letting Arthur live in that house for free. And he was also encouraging Arthur to come to Nashville to live near the rest of the family. Then that's kind of how Arthur sort of explained the situation. But it turns out that wasn't necessarily true. Lawrence Levine, Janet's dad, would end up, he canceled this lease he gave to Arthur because Arthur wasn't paying, which would then lead to Arthur having to file for bankruptcy. And I think eventually at that point, that's when he moved to Nashville. Now, Perry March, while working at his law firm, would eventually get in some hot water because he was writing, at the time, anonymous but very sexual in nature notes to one of the paralegals there, leaving it on her desk to read. And these are very explicit letters talking about the things that he would want to do to her sexually, despite, and he even said in the letters at that point, like I said, it was anonymous, so no one knew it was Perry for sure, but he had said, "Oh, I'm a married man, but I would love to do these things to you." Eventually, the law firm would set up a hidden camera to catch who was leaving these notes, and that's how they found out it was Perry. And so the law firm was like, "All right, we're going to give you the option. We're going to let you either choose to resign or we're going to fire you." But they gave him a lot of time to decide. And the paralegal became furious. She was upset with how the law firm seemed to be kind of giving him leeway in this. Eventually, he would end up having to pay her out $25,000. And he did that because it was an agreement they came to eventually avoid a sexual harassment lawsuit. But then Perry would end up getting a job at Lawrence Levine's law firm, his father-in-law. Throughout all of this, obviously Janet was upset because of the whole, sexual harassment thing. And people were noticing that she was kind of slipping a little out of her normal personality. She was less smiling and happy. She was becoming a little bit more depressed. But then they would end up buying a home in Forest Hills, Tennessee, this really beautiful, very large, spacious home. And while for a little bit there was kind of some more happiness being brought back into the marriage, this exciting new adventure with this new house, but it would soon kind of start to dip back down where both Perry and Janet were slipping into depression and there was just issues and cracks in the marriage. And so Perry would start seeing a therapist. Janet would see one. Sometimes they would see one together. But Perry, according to many people, would begin to distance himself, it looks like, from the marriage and from Janet. He was observed out and about at night in the company of several women. This would end up leading to arguments between he and Janet. They were fighting more often. And, the marriage really just seemed to kind of hit its breaking point. Perry became more publicly aggressive. He got into these loud, big arguments with neighbors. His neighbors would describe Perry as having this really just nasty attitude, a very poor temper, getting in arguments over the stupidest things with neighbors. Perry, meanwhile, was still trying to make installment payments to the paralegal from, prior, where he was sexually harassing. And I guess there was a final payment of $11,000 where he said to them, I can't afford it. I can't pay it. Which I think caused just more turmoil in the March household. They had a cleaning crew who would come to the March house to clean up. They had a maid and stuff. And one of the maids would say that they saw a book on divorce, kind of where Janet would normally be sitting and reading. And so it appeared that Janet was considering, filing officially for divorce. On August 14th, 1996, the children's nanny would come to the house, and the nanny would later recall that Janet, who was typically someone who was very welcoming, to the nanny when she came in, and the two of them typically would chat and they would laugh and they would just sort of talk about a lot of things. She said on that particular day, on August 14th, Janet had no desire to talk to her. Janet appeared to be completely withdrawn, and she just was quiet, and something was obviously she was just in a whole different mindset at that point. Friends would later come forward to state that around that time, Janet appeared to be kind of afraid of Perry. She seemed to be trying to avoid him because she just felt something. She said she had a reason or something to just be concerned about his behavior or afraid of him. And that may have eventually happened. In the morning and leading into the afternoon of August 15th, 1996, a couple of construction workers came to the March home because they were doing some repair work in the kitchen. And according to the repairmen, Janet was in the kitchen kind of giving them, telling them the things that they wanted to have done, while Perry was outside playing with the kids. The repair guys, they did their work, they finished it, and then they left. And those two repairmen were allegedly the last people to actually see Janet, other than her husband and the kids. Later that night, according to Perry and Janet got into a very large argument. A lot of screaming, a lot of aggression. It was very anger-filled. This is around 8 o'clock at night, and he said, listen, I will go to a hotel again, because he had been staying at hotels, I guess, every night for the past couple of, maybe a week or so. And so, but what Perry says, Janet said, is that Janet said, well, you know what? Don't bother, because I'm going on vacation. And she said, I'm going somewhere, I'm packing, and I'm not telling you where I'm going. Perry said that Janet then packed, a couple of clothing items into a bag. She got into her Volvo, and then she drove off. And she had her passport with her, I guess. Perry said that she also had $1,500 in cash and a little bit of pot, some weed, with her. She also, according to Perry, typed out a list of chores and things for Perry to do while she was gone. It was this very detailed list that she allegedly herself signed the bottom of that list. He says she officially left the house at 8:30 p.m. on that August 15th, 1996 day. And then at that point, no one saw Janet ever again. Perry called his family at about 9 p.m. to state that Janet had left him and the kids. He calls a couple of people that night, and then the last people he calls are Janet's parents, the Levines. And, Carolyn Levine, Janet's mom, was like, that's strange. That's unusual. Janet, you're saying she just left you and the kids for an indefinite amount of time? That's not like her. That's super weird. But she's like, but maybe she did. And so just, give us a call when she gets back in town, and, we'll talk this through. We'll see what we can do. The following morning, when I guess their house cleaners got to the house, they all noticed that Janet wasn't there. Her car wasn't there. And according to them, it appeared the house had already been cleaned, which was weird because they were the ones to clean the house. That was their job. Perry would approach the cleaners and specifically tell them, don't clean the children's playroom. Don't go in there. Then the nanny arrives at the house, and Perry tells the nanny that Janet had gone to California to visit her brother Mark, who was also a lawyer. The nanny was like, really? That's strange, because, anytime Janet would do anything like that, like ever, at all, like even a slight change of plans, Janet would always call the nanny to tell her, what's going on, but the nanny never got a phone call, not even a missed call or anything from her. Then a friend of the family would come over because, her kid had a play date with Samson, the March's son. And when this person arrived, she said every time they had a play dates that both Janet and Perry would come out, they would greet her, they would welcome her in the house, they would, talk with her while the kids played. But when this particular morning she came over for it, no one came out to greet her at all. Perry, Janet, obviously, because Janet was gone, but Perry didn't come out or anything. When this friend finally got in the house, she said she noticed Samson was like on this giant rug that was rolled up, and he was like playing on it. And one of the house cleaners had also will state later, that Perry told them to not clean that rug. Don't touch that rug, don't clean that rug. Later on, Perry would talk to Janet's parents, and at first Janet's parents they believed Perry's story, that Janet had just sort of kind of picked up and went to California to visit someone. Now, according to Mark, this brother in California, there was no plan to meet him at all. This was made up. Janet's mom was like she was just really concerned because this was just not like Janet. She wouldn't leave the kids like with this impromptu vacation to who really knows where. And especially without telling them, like the parents. Like this is strange. But they knew Perry, they trusted Perry, he had been in their lives for a long time, and so they were still kind of just, believing what he was saying. Now, this list that Janet had typed up allegedly and left for Perry stated that she would be back in 12 days. And so Perry managed to convince her parents, well, let's wait for that 12 days to be up before we really become concerned. And the parents kind of hesitantly agreed to that. Around this time, later down the road, they would learn that Perry had been making several phone calls to his father, Arthur, who was then living closer to them in the Nashville area. They wouldn't know exactly why, though, until, later. Now, Samson's birthday, his 6th birthday, was around this time. And Janet never called him on his birthday, because his birthday, I think, was like on August 20-something. And she was, again, still away, out of town, so to speak. And when his birthday came, she had actually planned a large birthday party for him. She planned it. It's very unusual that she didn't show up for it. She wasn't there. She did not call. She did not leave him any gifts. She did not send him any gifts. No contact whatsoever. And that's kind of when her parents were like, wait a minute. Janet she wouldn't ignore her child, who she loved more than anything. She loved her 2 kids. She would never do that. Just ignore him on his 6th birthday that she planned so long, this party. Like, this is something's up. And that's when Perry began to kind of join them, like, oh yeah, something is wrong here. For sure. And so on August 29th, 1996, Janet's parents would finally call the police to report their daughter as missing, because Janet had never come home. She hadn't called, she hadn't sent letters, she hadn't done a thing. She had just fallen off the face of the earth. So one of the first things police do is they check out this list that Perry said Janet had left. Well, a lot of Janet's friends and family had seen this list, and there's a lot of things about it that didn't check out according to how Janet normally spoke or how she typed. She didn't have, I guess, the most proper typing etiquette in terms of capitalizations and stuff like that. But Perry, on the other hand, was very, because he's a lawyer, he's very proper about how he types everything. And the list just appeared to be typed more by Perry than it looked to be typed by Janet. But police wanted to look at the computer where this came from. And they found the computer in the home. They saw it. It was, it looked fine. But then they noticed when they kind of took the cover off of the computer, the hard drive had been completely removed from it. And when they asked Perry, they're like, well, why is the hard drive removed? He's like, Jesus, I don't know. That's weird. I had never noticed that before. Why is the hard drive removed? What a mystery. Come on, Perry. By this time, Janet's brother Mark, he has gone to Nashville. And this is after Perry had said that she had gone to visit him in California. And so Perry was caught in this gigantic lie. And at that point, people like the police, whatever, and everything would say that when Mark arrived, Perry appeared to be physically unwell. Like he had just been caught in this giant lie, and he was shaking, and he's oh God. On September 7th, 1996, Janet's Volvo was found. It was found only 5 miles from the March's house. It was parked in an apartment building parking lot, and it had been backed into the space. Everybody immediately knew that Janet did not do that, because Janet never parked like that. She had a really hard time backing into spots. Hell, I do too. I can't do it. Inside the car were literally everything Perry said that Janet had packed, all just in the car, just there. The investigators had the car forensically looked at while it was still in its parking spot, and the forensic team noticed that there was this very kind of thick layer of dust, of pollen, of stuff that had fallen from the trees and stuff above. And this car hadn't just been parked there the day they found it. This car had been parked there for some time. They couldn't say it had been parked there since the day she disappeared, but it had been there for a while. They actually found cobwebs in the wheel well of the vehicle, indicating that the car had not been driving, the tires had not been rotating, again, for some time. On the floor mat of the car, they found Janet's sandals just sort of there, as if she was in her sandals and then poof, she disappeared and just left the sandals behind. Police also noticed that in the packed bag with clothing in it, like it had a dress and a couple like, shirts and stuff, but there was no bra and there were no bras and there was no underwear packed at all. She also had packed no toothpaste, no hairbrush, nothing like that. It was very minimal, as if someone had just throws crap in a bag and let's just pretend she is gone somewhere. So at this point, the Levines they're now completely like suspicious of Perry, as are police and many people. The Levines hired a private investigator, and the private investigator, every time they spoke to Perry always talked about Janet in the past tense. He never referred to her as like, she is this, or he always said, well, she was always in the past tense, which to those who don't know is usually one of those brain things that we don't realize we're doing. But like Perry, that would indicate that Perry knew she was no longer alive and therefore subconsciously wasn't able to differentiate that to cover up his lie. And so he referred to her in the past tense, meaning that it sounded like Perry knew she was already dead. When Perry found out that this private investigator was going to be doing this, he was livid, and he wanted to know, he demanded from the private investigator, I want to know everyone you've talked to, and I want to know everything you've asked them, and I want to know what their answers were. Well, why is that, bud? We're just trying to find your wife. Meanwhile, the police are also investigating this, and they discover that for whatever reason, roughly a week after Janet would have disappeared, Perry had gone to a tire store and asked them to replace all 4 of his car tires. And when police spoke to this tire place, the employees there said, we have no idea why he wanted us to do that, because all 4 of his tires were basically new and they were in great condition. We even told him, like, your tires don't need to be replaced, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfect. But he demanded 4 new tires. And his excuse was, I don't like that brand, so I want a different brand. Okay? At this point, Perry is aware that there's this private investigator, obviously, that police are also investigating him, that a lot of suspicion is falling on Perry. Of course, he's the husband, the soon-to-be potentially ex-husband. They're finding out about all these arguments, these fights. Perry had maybe been unfaithful. At least he had sexually harassed a female coworker, got in a lot of trouble for it. The marriage was rocky, and so obviously all eyes are pointing towards him. And what does he do? He takes the kids, he moves out of state to Chicago, Illinois. Like an innocent person does, flees the area. He even packed up all of her belongings and took them with him. And apparently, I guess one of Janet's friends lived in Chicago, and Perry was like talking to her on the phone one time after he picked up and left to go to Chicago. And he asked her, like, do you think I killed Janet? But then he says to her, before you answer, what would you say if you found out that I killed Janet and I put her in the trunk of the car? I drove her away from the house while the kids were playing, or while the kids were sleeping inside. I left them alone. And then I returned back to the house like nothing ever happened. What would you say? What the fuck? What kind of question is that, bud? Who asks that question to somebody? Not an innocent person. So obviously this friend tells the police. And at this point now, police, Janet's parents, her family, all of her friends, everyone thinks Perry killed her and disposed of her somewhere. The problem is they haven't found Janet. And there is actually no evidence that Janet is dead. They have no blood at the house. They've searched that house as thoroughly as humanly possible. And they looked into this, why was there this big rug that he demanded people not clean or touch? Well, it turns out he had purchased that rug apparently to cover up some portion of the floor, which people in their life thought that was strange because Perry and Janet weren't ones to have decorative rugs. So they thought that was kind of strange that he suddenly had this. But that being said, they didn't find any forensic evidence at the house. There wasn't any blood or, ripped out hair in the house or any sign whatsoever of anything going bad there. The kids didn't see or hear anything. There were no other witnesses who can say they saw or heard anything happen between Perry and Janet. that would have led to them thinking he definitely killed her. There was nothing. They searched high and low for Janet. I mean, they got helicopters in the air. They got people searching on foot. They have police. They have volunteers. They have family, all the friends, all out there combing the entire area, searching thoroughly for her. Not a single trace of her, other than them finding her car with her belongings in it. But even that didn't yield anything. The car didn't show signs of, there's no blood, nothing like that. The driver's seat was actually pushed up in the position that Janet would have been if she was driving. It was in her position. Usually, sometimes the killers will forget and they'll like put the seat all the way back because they're taller. But in this case, that didn't happen. They got cadaver dogs, searching the house, searching their property. It was a big property, searching everywhere, with cadaver dogs. Nothing. And it got to a point where Perry would refuse to cooperate with police. He wasn't going to be answering any questions. He wasn't doing shit. But at that point, I mean, it was more than obvious, even though there was no evidence, that Perry had killed her. They had fought that night. He killed her somehow, some way. Maybe he strangled her to death, and that's why there was no blood or anything at the crime scene or at the house. But they all knew she was dead, and they all knew he did it. But it's really difficult to prosecute without a body. It's really difficult to prosecute without a body and also without evidence of a murder. Janet's parents would end up taking Perry to court to get custody of the two kids. Both sides are lawyers, so they're both very familiar with the process. But I believe that Janet's parents ended up winning out and they were granted temporary custody of the two kids just because Perry was considered a suspect in this potential murder. So the court said, well, let's better be safe than sorry. They also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Perry for the death of their daughter Janet, and they actually won. So a jury did determine that Perry had caused Janet's death, despite, again, there not being any evidence of it. And so everything was going kind of great in their favor. Perry then moves to Mexico. He starts working at a different firm, and he seems to be kind of having this new life. But then everything kind of flips back. Courts would eventually overturn the wrongful death lawsuit, and the kids were eventually returned to Perry. Perry seems to be getting away with it. Really, if you think about it, he's living his life now. He's got his kids back. He's living in Mexico. Everything is hunky-dory for him. Meanwhile, Janet's still nowhere to be found, and no true resolution to this. But the police in Tennessee are like, no, we're not letting him get away with this. And so they began, I think around 2004, to begin the indictment process against him for murder. And eventually a grand jury came back with an indictment. They said, we're going to be an indictment of charges on second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and stuff like that. And so in 2005, Perry was formally arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of his wife, Janet. He was arrested in Mexico, and he was brought back to the States. So Perry is now in a jail in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's bunkmates with a guy named Russell Ferris, who was also in jail awaiting a trial for a murder charge and also attempted murder. Russell Ferris would then go to the police to state that Perry had asked him to kill his in-laws. He had asked him to murder Lawrence and Carolyn Levine. Perry promised him he would basically post Russell Ferris's bond and pay him if he did this. And so the police were like, did he really do this? Come on. But Russell's like, put a fucking wire on me. I'll get him to say it again. And so he goes back into, he goes back to see Perry in prison because he's still in prison. And he's wearing a wire and he gets Perry to talk about it.
Take your time at it. You don't make any mistakes. You work carefully. You figure your process. You do what you need to do. The thing you have to remember is you have to clear the house for kids, make sure there's no kid there, and then you have to wait for the other family there together.
Yeah.
Leave no trace.
Look here, Perry. If they're both in that house, if they answer that door, it's over.
And so he did, and it's confirmed. He literally has tried to have the Levines murdered. The guy told Perry, listen, I'm going to walk up to that house, I'm going to knock on their door, they answer it, boom, I'm killing them both. Obviously, he wasn't going to because he'd already gone to police, but he had to play the part. And another twist came in when Perry had told Russell to contact his dad, Arthur. And so I guess Arthur he was actually in Mexico at that point. And the police eventually go to Mexico and they arrest Arthur because they also had recorded phone calls between Ferris and Arthur with regards to this plot to kill the Levines. Arthur was caught red-handed on the phone calls. And so Perry is then arrested a second time. He's already arrested still for Janet's murder, but then he's rearrested and charged with the solicitation to commit murder on the Levines. And then Arthur, his dad, is also arrested with solicitation to commit murder. While in prison, Perry basically opens his yapper and he admits to some inmates that he had killed Janet, that they had gotten into a lot of arguments, that there was just discussion of divorce and how Perry was, unfaithful and he had sexually harassed women and basically Janet had enough of it and so he killed her after an argument. So police are now asking Arthur, what do you know about Janet? Because now he's arrested, right, for solicitation to commit murder. And he's this almost 80-year-old man who's withering away. And eventually he agrees to take a plea deal with the solicitation part. And he tells police, I moved her body for him. Perry had told Arthur that he had killed Janet. He buried her body. And then he had asked Arthur to move her body.
Did your son ask you to do something for him, to assist him in a matter?
He asked me to help dispose of Janet's body.
Arthur also confirms to police that Perry admitted to him that he destroyed the hard drive on the computer because of the typed up letter and everything. So basically Arthur says that, he redug a grave in a different location in Kentucky, I think is where he said he ended up moving her body. And he confirmed it. He's like, I saw her body literally the night or something after, she was killed. I saw her body. Perry showed it to me. And then I dug her back up and I moved her to Kentucky to a different spot. It's just plain as day. And so police go to that location where he says she was. They dug all over and they could not find her. She was not there. Even still, they had enough now at this point to go forward with this trial against Perry March. And it finally began. Prosecutors would kind of give some actual physical evidence because in the trunk of her car, because they had found it, there was, I guess, clumps of hair, and they found DNA, which they were able to do mitochondrial DNA testing and discovered that there was DNA in the trunk of the car that belonged to Janet to indicate that she was in her own trunk. Was it absolutely compelling enough to say that definitely Perry killed her? Not 100%, because, as you open your trunk, your hair tends to fall into it, and, it's your car. So it wasn't signed, sealed, delivered. That proves he did it. But they also have the testimony of Arthur stating he saw the body. He said everything Perry did, how he destroyed the hard drive, the whole plot, the whole plan. They also presented evidence of the actual, jail, recordings of Perry ordering his in-laws to be murdered, and it was all caught on audio, and it was more than enough. And so he was found guilty of the murder of Janet March. All of the charges against him, conspiring to murder the Levines, the actual second-degree murder of Janet, plus other things, he was given a grand total of 56 years in prison. And you might be wondering, why wasn't it life without parole? Because they don't have her body. So there is that teeniest possibility she may still be alive, even though we all know she likely isn't. But there wasn't concrete proof to state she was 100% dead. And so that's why he was not given that full, complete life sentence. But 56 years for him, he's going to be very, very old when if he ever is released. Arthur was also, first he actually took a plea deal to get 18 months in prison for his cooperation, The judge was like, no, 18 months, go fuck yourself. We're not doing that. He gave him 5 years instead for all of his involvement in all of this. And Arthur would end up dying in prison. Perry March would obviously appeal many, many times, and essentially, I mean, the long and the short of it is Perry March is still in prison, rotting away. They still have not found Janet. Her body has never been recovered. I mean, let's be real, she is likely dead, but I hope one day they somehow find her, to give that proper closure, that proper burial she deserves. At least the monster who likely killed her, can't say 100%, but likely killed her, at least he is rotting away in a prison cell, hopefully until the day he dies. And Janet March, in some way, shape, or form, got the justice she rightfully deserved. Like I finish every single video, I am going to shove an object in my mouth to see how much I can fit down my throat. As a gay man, that probably sounded very strange, or very, very... a mouse. Ugh. Do I have herpes now because of that? Ugh. What? In a span of 18 minutes, a young man went from going to meet his friends to never being seen alive again. Hello, true crimerers. This is the very strange case of Noah Donohoe. Viewer discretion is advised. Some point in 2004, Fiona Donohoe would be in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the States, and she would meet a man by the name of Emmanuel. They would strike up a romantic little fling, and it would result in Fiona becoming pregnant. Emmanuel was originally from Senegal and Fiona was originally from Ireland. During the pregnancy, Fiona would end up moving back to Ireland, specifically in Belfast, and Emmanuel would stay in the States. Their son, Noah Donohoe, was born on November 25th, 2005, and Emmanuel was not there for the birth. As a matter of fact, Emmanuel never met Noah in person, but as Noah grew older and older, he would communicate with his father through Skype. Noah grew up to be a very loving and caring young man. He seemed to be wise beyond his years. He was described as someone who would just bring joy to everyone he met, and he could make anyone smile. At the age of 14, he would be described as the perfect gentleman with the heart of a lion. Noah was also very academically gifted. This was a very, very smart kid. He at one point won something called the Spirit of the College Award. He had perfect attendance. He won UK maths competitions. He was an incredibly involved student. He got excellent grades. He excelled, especially in science, and his dream was to eventually study medicine and work in the medical field. On top of all of that, he played rugby, he played basketball, and he was an excellent cellist. Now we're going to fast forward to 2020, and we're right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Noah Donohoe is now a 14-year-old boy, and like I'm sure most kids his age, after being locked up for 3, 4, 5 months, he just really wanted to get out and breathe the fresh air. On June 21st, 2020, Noah would have plans to go meet some friends, and they were all going to work together on a school project. And the trek he would be making was relatively brief, and it was one that he did literally all the time. When he left home, he obviously had his bike to take to his friends, but he was also wearing a backpack, and in that backpack, he had his laptop and a couple of books. At 5:45 p.m., it is known at this point that is when Noah left his home. The plan was to meet his friends at Cave Hill Country Park. which was literally just a few miles away. Later on, when CCTV is being used to investigate this case, this is kind of how they got the timeline. So at 5:50 p.m., Noah is seen on CCTV. He is on his bike and he's going down Royal Avenue, and he has on his helmet, he has on his backpack, everything looked normal. It's also important to note that this particular area he was in Belfast was extremely busy. A lot of people, a lot of cars, a lot of potential witnesses. At 6 p.m., someone would later come forward to say that they saw Noah fall off of his bike. This witness approached Noah to help him get up and kind of, just to help him. But Noah said, no, that's okay. He got back on his bike and he took off. And then just a couple of minutes later, CCTV finds him again on his bike and everything seems normal. And then this is where it gets very, very weird. Literally just 2 minutes after Noah is last seen on that CCTV footage, he is picked up once again, now in a little housing area. Apparently this is a housing estate area on Northwood Road, and it's actually 3 miles away from where he was supposed to be going. And all of a sudden, again within just 2 minutes, Noah is not wearing any clothing. All of it is gone. He is completely in the nude on his bike. His helmet is gone. His backpack is gone. It is just him on his bike, nude. Unfortunately, the time frame, which is again a brief 2 minutes, where all of this seemed to happen, was not caught on any cameras, and literally not one person witnessed it. Allegedly. Then he is seen in a cul-de-sac. Now, this point, he is being witnessed by actual people, and when they see him, he is no longer with his bike. He is last seen walking down the side of a house, like a little pathway, and then, which is the direction of like a park, and then also a whole, like his giant drainage system. But then after that sighting, no one sees him ever again. Noah never shows up to meet his friends. His mother is then alerted about this, so she reports him missing at 9:30 p.m. that same night. The very next day, after police have already opened a missing persons investigation, one of the people who lived in the neighborhood that Noah was last seen in would come forward not only with their witness statement to say, I saw him, but they also said his bike is still here. And it was just kind of laying in the middle of the road. So at this point, police are now going to start focusing their search in this entire surrounding area. They have the police force, they have volunteers, they have obviously Noah's family. Everyone is out there searching. They are looking through, bushes. They're looking through all the tall grass. They're looking on top of hills. They're looking everywhere they could possibly think. And initially, they can't find anything. They also are searching the Northwood Road area, and that is when they find articles of his clothing. And the clothing is just scattered. It's just kind of just everywhere. And what they found was his helmet, his hoodie, and his shoes. His underwear, his t-shirt, and the shorts he was wearing have never been found. They would also find Noah's cell phone at a park, and this park was like far away from where all these other items were found, but it was a park that Noah would have passed on his way to meet his friends. This is when police come up with their theory. Keep in mind, Noah has still not been found. Police say at a press conference that they think that Noah fell off his bike because of the witness that would come forward to say they saw Noah fall off his bike. He must have hit his head fairly hard, even though he was wearing a helmet when it happened. And they speculate that he became very disoriented. He didn't know where he was. He may have been concussed. And then they say that's why he took off his clothes, his helmet, and He discarded everything because he was in like a disoriented, just out of his mind state. 3 days after he goes missing, enter Daryl Paul. Daryl was a many times convicted drug dealer, drug user. He had a history of theft, robberies, and he was very, very addicted to heroin. 3 days after Noah went missing, Daryl Paul was caught trying to sell Noah's laptop at a pawn shop. Police also find out that this was not the first attempt he made to sell that laptop. He actually tried to sell it to a group of friends of his the night prior to the pawn shop. So police go to Mr. Paul's home, and lo and behold, they find Noah's backpack as well. Daryl did not actually successfully sell the laptop, so what he did was he brought it to a community center where he was sort of in and out of. It was like a homeless community shelter where a friend/girlfriend of his, her name was Maria Nolan. She was in possession of the laptop. Now, this community center was literally just down the road from where Noah and his mother lived. Daryl Paul is then arrested. He is then brought back to the police station where he is questioned, as well as his girlfriend Maria. He claims that he just found Noah's backpack just leaning up against a wall. And this was at the University of Ulster building. This would actually add up with the timeline and the CCTV footage because Noah would have had to go past that point, and that's likely where he dropped off his backpack, allegedly. So for the time being, Daryl Paul was released. Police did not have any physical evidence connecting him to physically doing any harm to Noah, and also police did find CCTV footage of Daryl Paul in a different part of town during the same time that Noah would have gone missing. Noah was also a mixed race individual. He had a black father and a white mother, and he lived in a prominently Catholic, part of the city where Noah was basically riding his bike through. It was a loyalist Protestant part of town, a very white part of town. And this is where the Troubles took place, which was a sectarian war from what I'm reading. I don't know much about that. But around the same time, there were other instances where teenagers or college students who were not white were attacked by other white people, and these were racially motivated crimes and or religiously motivated crimes. So it's not out of the question that Noah Donohoe, who is, black, who is Catholic, who is in this dangerous part of town, if you will, could have been met by some potential hate crime group. People are also speculating that he was killed by some racist group of people, and then he was buried somewhere, but these were all just rumors, and none of it led to anything productive or truthful. This entire case was littered with rumors and falsehoods and just a whole bunch of lies, people trying to point police in the wrong direction, and police finally had to say, just stop, please do not listen to the rumors, don't listen to any of this. We are conducting our investigation, and let us do our job. Noah's mother, Fiona, was sort of in the thought process of, well, I don't think police are either doing everything they should be. Speculations that maybe police, this is some kind of cover-up, because there was a rumor that this could have been the work of a police informant. And so police then had to protect this informant, even though they may have murdered or kidnapped Noah Donohoe. Again, just rumors. But in the end, Fiona would just really think that the police were handling this poorly, that they were incompetent, that they were not really investigating certain leads the way they should have. Several days after all of this is happening, they finally find the body of Noah Donohoe. Noah was found inside of a drainage system. This drainage system was right behind the housing community where he was last seen. He wasn't just found like at the beginning of this, tunnel system. He was found almost 1,000 meters into it. The troubling part of this is there wasn't a lot of water damage to his body. He only had water damage a little bit on his hands and on his feet. They weren't sure if he was brought through the tunnel system because of the tide, or if he himself got down there. But the problem is there's a lot of obstructions. There's a lot of this, it's very difficult. It's very dark, very difficult to navigate. So it's kind of up in the air as to how in the hell he got so far into the system. But police would announce that they do not believe that Noah was murdered. They believe that this was either an accidental death or possibly he ended his own life. This drainage system is very tucked away, and Noah had never been to this part of town. He had no idea this drainage system even existed. In fact, people who lived in that housing community who were questioned, most of them had no idea it was even back there. How and why did he get in there? According to Noah's friends and family, he was in really good spirits. He seemed to be very happy. He showed no signs of depression. He was very excited about this school project they were working on. He was very excited to eventually move on to work in the medical field. Noah didn't have any known enemies. He wasn't in any kind of bad spirits at all. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary in Noah Donohoe's life. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that he wasn't depressed or he wasn't having thoughts of ending his own life, of course. I'm just pointing out the fact that there were no signs of that to indicate why he would do all of this crazy stuff and go into a drainage ditch and end his own life. According to what I can find, his cause of death was drowning. And according to police, there were no signs of foul play on his body. They stated that they do not believe that any person brought physical harm to Noah. But they also haven't been very public with his autopsy report. They have kept it pretty hidden, which could give credence to Fiona's concerns that police may be covering something up. Again, this is just speculation. There is no proven facts behind this. Why not just release the entire autopsy report so everyone could know? How is he even able to enter the drainage ditch? Well, a week prior, the maintenance man who had done work on it, he forgot to lock it. There is also this kind of odd connection to Jordan Peterson. Well, according to Instagram reports, because they were looking through all of Noah's Instagram, messages, all of social media, and apparently he was in communication, and they have not released any of the communication itself, but he was in communication with an account that was claiming to be Jordan Peterson. Noah apparently was very interested in Jordan Peterson's work. In fact, one of the books that he had in his book bag was a Jordan Peterson book. So police had to reach out to Mr. Peterson, and over the course of some conversations and some, looking deeper into these accounts, they came to the conclusion that this was not an actual account by Jordan Peterson. It was just a fake account. Speculation, of course, has run wild with theories and rumors. Perhaps Noah was involved in some group initiation of some kind and something went horribly wrong. Maybe Noah was drugged by some creep and then just dumped in the drainage ditch, but again, where he was found, it would still be pretty difficult for someone to drag a body through that. Ultimately, most people believe that Noah Donohoe was likely attacked and killed because of the color of his skin and also his religion. Police just don't seem to really want to investigate that angle, or they're just saying, no, it's not what it is. Fiona said that she is perfectly willing to accept the fact that Noah could have ended his own life, but there's been no proof to indicate that, especially the fact that his autopsy report is very hush. There was no witnesses who saw Noah walk into that drain pipe. Allegedly, around that time, there were witnesses who tried to come forward to police that said they heard loud screaming coming from what was probably a young person, and then it just suddenly stopped. And this was in an area right by the drainage ditch. And this was 4 different people who came forward to say they heard it, but police said, no, it was probably not that. Also add to the fact that he was allegedly in this drainage ditch for quite some time, yet his body wasn't all that decomposed, and he only had water damage again to his hands and his feet. The rest of his body did not have any water damage. He also allegedly was not, bitten by any sewer rats or any wildlife that may have been down there. Obviously this isn't a sewer kind of thing, so there was no bacterial type damage to his body. And there was also no insect activity, which is probably the strangest thing. Especially being in that environment. How on earth, for a long period of time, was there no insect activity? So some believe that he was probably killed just shortly before he was found. Police never forensically investigated the home of Mr. Paul, who had the laptop. They never forensically investigated the home where Maria was, who actually was in possession of the laptop. They also never forensically investigated the neighborhood that the drainage system was in, where he was last seen. Did this Daryl Paul fella, this heroin addict, did he just happen upon Noah and stole his shit and then ended his life because, witness? Later, a prisoner would actually confess to another fellow prisoner that he was the one to kill Noah Donohoe. But police said, no, no. How do you explain Noah Donohoe's behavior in the 18-minute window of time that he left his house to when he was last seen in that neighborhood? Why did he ditch his backpack? Why did he take off his clothing in that little 2-minute window of time? What happened there where he took off his clothes, got back on his bike, and then rode nude to a neighborhood? Was the fall worse than what people may think? People said he was wearing his helmet, but were they mistaken? This neighborhood is miles away from where he intended to go. Being disoriented could explain that. Was he attacked by someone who stole his backpack and his laptop, and somehow his clothing came off and he just tried to escape and get away as fast as he could? But then why not say anything to anyone? Was he attacked because of the color of his skin or his family's religion? Did Noah Donohoe go into that drainage system on his own? Was he forced in there by someone? Did he escape in there trying to hide and somehow just got disoriented in there because it was pitch dark and couldn't find his way out, and eventually he died from the elements? Unfortunately, I don't have the answers. His mother and his family just want to know the truth about what happened to him that day. What happened to him between 5:45 p.m. when everything seemed normal and happy, and then shortly after 6 p.m. when it all just went away. How does a person in about 18 minutes go from being this happy-go-lucky, super intelligent kid to eventually finding himself in a drainage ditch where he would die? Honestly, to me, none of this makes sense. And I don't know what to think or believe about it. I have a hard time believing that he went in there on his own and then just died. Like, if he drowned, and that's just, again, speculation, if he drowned, how did he do that to himself? There are far too many questions. What the hell happened to Noah Donohoe? I'm sure somewhere, someone out there knows the truth. And if that person is you, you should come forward. And that is the end of today's video, True Crimerers. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, ta-ta for now, True Crime Aroonies. Waka! Nope. That was a really bad way to end.